All right, let's dive into the coddling of the American mind, shall we? It's been making waves, and I know a lot of you are curious about it. So we're going to try to break down the main ideas, make it digestible.
Yeah, sounds good.
So first things first, a little background on the authors. We've got Greg Lukianoff. He's the head of FIRE. That's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. And Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist who focuses on morality.
Okay, interesting combo.
Right. And they basically argue that this whole safetyism thing is having a pretty big impact on young people today.
Oh yeah, definitely heard that term thrown around a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So let's unpack it, see what they're really getting at.
It is fascinating though, right? This idea that by protecting young people, shielding them from every little discomfort, we might actually be doing them a disservice in the long run.
Yeah, it's like, are we going too far?
Mm.
And the book, it lays out these three great untruths. These ideas that have become pretty widespread, like what doesn't kill you makes you weaker.
Oh yeah.
Always trust your feelings.
Oh, I've heard that one.
And then life is a battle between good people and evil people.
Right.
So pretty bold statements, right?
Yeah.
Have you encountered these kind of ideas out in the world?
Oh, absolutely, in various forms.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Lukianoff and Haidt, they argue that these untruths, these ideas, are actually shaping a generation that's more fragile, maybe even more polarized.
It's a compelling argument. I mean, one of the most interesting concepts they bring up is this idea of concept creep.
Okay, what's that?
So it's basically how the meaning of words like trauma, bullying, even abuse has expanded so much.
Yeah.
Like, think about it.
Yeah.
You, the listener, you might have experienced something upsetting, difficult, sure. But does that automatically mean it qualifies as trauma in the way the word was originally used?
Yeah.
You know?
That's a good point.
It's not about dismissing anyone's experiences, of course. But the book really makes you think about how these expanding definitions, they might actually be impacting our culture in ways we haven't fully considered.
I see what you mean. It's like they used that example of the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Who originally only used the word trauma for like severe physical injuries, but
yeah.
then over time it started to include emotional distress as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's like, if everything that makes us uncomfortable gets labeled as trauma, does that diminish the experiences of those who have been through truly horrific, life-altering events?
It's a valid question.
Yeah.
And does it create this expectation that we should always be shielded from anything unpleasant, anything challenging?
Right, like discomfort is just bad, period. And then they bring up this idea of anti-fragility, right?
Oh, yes. That's a great one.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
It's basically this concept that some things, they actually get stronger when they face challenges, when they face a bit of stress. It's not about, seeking out pain, of course.
Right.
But recognizing that a little bit of stress, a little bit of struggle can actually be good for us.
Okay, so how does anti-fragility work, like practically speaking?
Well, think about learning a new language.
Okay.
It's frustrating in the beginning, right? You make mistakes constantly.
Definitely.
But each of those mistakes, they actually help you learn faster. They make you better.
Yeah.
You're becoming anti-fragile in your language learning.
Interesting.
And the book argues that this applies to kids too,
Okay.
They need to experience setbacks. They need to experience challenges to really develop resilience, to learn how to bounce back.
Like it's okay to fail sometimes.
Exactly.
And learn from it.
And they actually call it the peanut allergy mistake.
Peanut allergy mistake.
Yeah, so it turns out that this overprotection from peanuts, trying to keep kids completely away from them,
Oh, right.
actually backfired.
It did.
Yeah, it seems like it actually led to more allergies.
Wow. So you're saying that by shielding kids from everyday risks, like letting them play outside unsupervised or work through little conflicts with their friends on their own, we're actually making them less equipped to handle the real world.
That's what the authors suggest, yeah.
Huh.
It might seem counterintuitive, but a little bit of risk, a little bit of challenge, it could make kids stronger and healthier in the long run.
Okay, but that's a pretty big claim. Is there any research to back this up?
There is, actually. And that's where the work of Jean Twenge comes in.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that name.
She's done a ton of research on iGen.
iGen?
Yeah, it's generation born after 1995.
Oh, wow. So that's current teenagers and young adults.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And have you noticed that rates of anxiety and depression seem to be just skyrocketing among young people?
It feels like everyone's talking about mental health these days. It's a huge topic.
Well, Twenge, she found that iGen actually has significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression compared to previous generations.
Really? That much higher?
Yeah. It's pretty striking. And one of the big things she links it to is, you guessed it, the rise of social media and smartphones.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I mean, I can definitely see how all that screen time and the constant social comparison could be playing a role.
Right.
But is it really the technology itself? That's the problem,
Yep.
or is it how we're using it?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
But her research seems to suggest that it's not just the screen time in and of itself.
Hmm.
Highly social teenagers,
Hmm.
the ones who have strong face-to-face interactions, they don't seem to be as negatively impacted by screen time.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like real world connections are still crucial.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, but the book does raise some, valid concerns about how technology might be interfering with those real-world connections,
Hmm.
especially during those, critical developmental years.
Yeah, when those connections are so important. So we've got overprotection, we've got social media. Does the book connect all this back to those great untruths at all?
Oh, they do, yeah.
Yeah.
They talk about how those untruths, those sort of, widespread ideas can feed into common cognitive distortions.
Okay, so what are cognitive distortions?
Basically, they're ways our minds kind of twist reality.
Gotcha.
They often lead us to more negative interpretations of situations.
Mm-hmm.
Have
Interesting.
you ever found yourself like jumping to the worst case scenario?
Oh, all the time.
Right.
I'm like the queen of catastrophizing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a classic cognitive distortion.
Oh, wow.
The book dives into others like mind reading,
Mind reading.
where you assume you know what other people are thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's emotional reasoning, where you let your feelings dictate your reality.
Hmm.
I feel this way, therefore it must be true.
Right, right.
And all these distortions, they can amplify anxieties, lead to misinterpretations, especially
Yeah.
in social situations.
Oh, for sure. And that brings us to microaggressions, right?
Nice.
Which is, it's a bit of a hot button topic.
Yeah, it can be.
Those subtle, often unintentional slights or insults that some people perceive as offensive, usually based on their group membership.
Mm-hmm.
The book gives examples like someone asking where you're really from,
Oh, yeah.
implying that you don't belong,
Yeah.
or commenting on how articulate someone is, but with this underlying assumption tied to their race.
Mm-hmm. It's tricky
Yeah.
because the authors, they acknowledge that these comments can be hurtful,
Mm.
but they also challenge the assumption that they always come from a place of malicious intent.
Right.
They really encourage us to think critically about intent versus impact.
Okay, that's a good distinction.
It's a nuanced issue for sure.
Yeah.
And the book delves into the complexities of it without shying away from the potential harm these interactions can cause.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it seems like this is where call-out culture comes in,
Yeah.
where individuals are publicly shamed for perceived offenses, often on social media. The book has that story, that really chilling story from a Smith College student
Oh, right.
who felt so much pressure to conform and self-censor because she was afraid of being called out.
It's a powerful example.
It is.
It really shows how this culture of fear and public shaming, it can actually stifle open dialogue and intellectual exploration.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you think, if you were in that student's shoes, would you feel comfortable expressing your true thoughts?
Right.
Or would you be too afraid of the backlash?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And it seems like this call-out culture, it thrives in these environments where people are already on edge, where there's a lot of political polarization and tension.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The book dives into how universities have become these flashpoints in our increasingly polarized political landscape.
Yeah, definitely.
Like there's this polarization cycle.
A cycle?
Yeah, where each side kind of demonizes the
Oh,
other.
I see.
And that just escalates the hostility and makes it almost impossible to have a constructive dialogue.
Right, because you're not even seeing the other side as human anymore.
Exactly. And,
Ah.
universities, they're these hubs of ideas and debate, right? So they're naturally going to be at the forefront of these clashes.
Right, yeah. We see it all the time with like controversial speakers and the protests that erupt around them. The book brings up those cases like Charles Murray at Middlebury College and Brett Weinstein at Evergreen State College.
Oh, yeah, those were big.
Those were, yeah.
Definitely made headlines.
Yeah, and they really show like how real the consequences of this polarization can be, especially on campus.
It's a shame, though, in a way, because universities, they're supposed to be these places where you're exposed to a whole range of viewpoints.
Right.
But the authors,
Yeah.
they argue that this whole culture of safetyism, it might actually be hindering the pursuit of truth.
Okay, that's a pretty bold claim. How do they back that up?
Well, they point to this lack of viewpoint diversity, especially among professors. There's an overrepresentation of left-leaning professors.
Okay.
And when you have this lack of intellectual diversity, like a monoculture of ideas,
Hmm.
it can lead to, well, a skewed understanding of complex issues.
Right. It's like trying to solve a complex equation, but you only have like half the variables. You might get an answer, but it's probably not the right one.
Exactly. They highlight that case of Brett Weinstein at Evergreen.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He was targeted for questioning a planned day of absence.
Where white students and faculty were asked to stay off campus?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
And he was, generally aligned with progressive values, but he became a target just for expressing a different viewpoint.
Wow. So even though he was like broadly on the same side, just questioning this one specific thing was enough to get him in trouble.
It's a really stark illustration of how quickly things can escalate
Yeah.
when there's this lack of tolerance for dissenting opinions.
Right.
The book uses that story to really show how this kind of intellectual homogeneity, it can stifle open inquiry and ultimately hurt the search for truth.
Okay, so we've talked about like the problems, the downsides of all this, but does the book offer any solutions? It can't be all doom and gloom.
No, not at all. They actually offer some really practical advice for how to cultivate wisdom
Yeah.
in a culture that seems to be embracing its opposite.
Okay, I like that. So how do we get wiser?
Well, they break it down into 3 levels: wiser kids, wiser universities, and then wiser societies.
Okay, let's start with the kids. What can parents do to raise more resilient, less anxious kids, kids who are prepared for the real world?
They have a whole section called Wiser Kids, and it's full of advice based on all this research on child development. And one of the key takeaways is, ready for this, dial back the overprotection.
Oh, okay, back to that.
Yeah, let kids take risks.
So like let them walk to school by themselves,
Yeah,
climb trees, just like play outside without a parent hovering over them.
exactly. Exactly. It's about giving them space to make mistakes, to experience those setbacks, and learn to navigate challenges on their own.
Right, like we were talking about anti-fragility before. It applies to kids too. The
Exactly.
more you try to protect them from every little thing, the more fragile they become.
That's the idea. They even suggest this let grow license.
The license.
Yeah, like a little certificate that parents can print out.
Okay.
It gives kids this, symbolic permission to explore their neighborhood, play unsupervised, engage in those activities that, previous generations just took for granted.
Oh, I love that. It's like a pushback against this culture of overprotection.
Exactly.
But okay, what about technology? I mean, we can't just send kids out into the world without considering the potential dangers, especially online.
Right. And the book acknowledges that. They encourage parents to set clear limits on device time
Okay, yeah.
and pay attention to the content their kids are consuming online.
So it's not about being anti-technology,
Yep.
but about using it in a way that enhances their well-being rather than, takes away from it.
Precisely. And it's about modeling those healthy habits ourselves.
Oh, right. Lead by example.
They're so perceptive.
They really are.
They're much more likely to adopt those positive behaviors if they see us doing them.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about kids, we've talked about parents. What about universities? What can they do to foster more intellectual diversity? Encourage open inquiry on campus.
The book argues that universities, they need to really embrace viewpoint diversity, especially among faculty. Exposing students to a range of perspectives, it's essential for developing critical thinking skills and promoting a genuine pursuit of truth.
Okay, but how do you encourage that kind of diversity when there's so much pressure to conform, especially on certain issues?
It's a challenge for sure, but the book suggests that universities can create spaces for respectful disagreement, where students and faculty feel comfortable expressing a wide range of viewpoints,
Yeah.
without fear of being censored or punished.
So it's not just about inviting like controversial speakers to campus. It's about fostering a culture where open dialogue is encouraged and valued.
Exactly. And it's about teaching students how to think critically,
Yeah.
how to evaluate evidence,
Hmm.
how to engage in reasoned debate.
Those are crucial skills for navigating the world, especially today when everything's so complex and there's so much information and misinformation flying around.
Absolutely. We can't just shield students from difficult ideas.
Right.
We need to give them the tools to grapple with those ideas and form their own informed opinions.
And to be able to like disagree respectfully. without resorting to, name calling or shutting
Wait,
down the conversation.
exactly. The authors also emphasize this idea of intellectual humility.
Okay, what's that?
It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers
Right.
and that learning is a lifelong process.
It's like being open to being wrong, which can be hard,
It can be really hard.
especially when you feel strongly about something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's about embracing the possibility that, maybe our current understanding is incomplete
Hmm.
or even incorrect.
And being willing to revise our beliefs
Yeah.
when we're presented with compelling evidence.
Exactly. That's the essence of intellectual growth, isn't it?
It is, it is. And it's something that's so easily lost in this culture that seems to prize certainty and moral purity over open inquiry and, nuanced understanding.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. We need to move away from this, what they call common enemy identity politics.
Common enemy identity politics.
Yeah, where we define ourselves in opposition to others.
Oh, right. Like us versus them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our shared humanity,
Mm-hmm.
our shared values, our shared goals.
Like we're all in this together
We are.
at the end of the day.
Yeah, and we need to be willing to step outside of our own echo chambers.
Our little bubbles.
Yes, exactly. And listen with empathy
Yeah.
to those who hold different views.
It's about seeking understanding. Right. Rather
Yeah.
than just like scoring points or trying to win an argument.
Right.
And recognizing that disagreement doesn't have to be a threat.
It doesn't.
Can be an opportunity for growth, for learning.
Absolutely. And the book actually highlights individuals and organizations who are working to counter this trend,
Oh, okay. Like who?
to promote civil discourse,
Mm-hmm.
to find common ground, even when there's disagreement.
I like that.
Yeah, so there are groups like the Heterodox Academy,
Yeah.
which encourages viewpoint diversity within universities.
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, and then there's Braver Angels.
Braver Angels.
They bring together people from across the political spectrum
Oh, wow.
for workshops and dialogues
Interesting.
aimed at fostering understanding and building relationships.
So it's like people are actually getting together face to face, trying to have these hard conversations and
Yeah.
find some common ground.
Exactly. It's really encouraging to see.
It is. It is. It's like people are recognizing the dangers of all this polarization and actively looking for ways to bridge the divide.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's heartwarming to see, right? People actually trying to connect, trying to build bridges instead of just burning them down. But it sounds like this book, The Coddling of the American Mind, is arguing that this polarization isn't just happening on campus, it's happening on a much bigger, broader societal level, too.
Oh, absolutely. The authors, they argue that social media has basically become this breeding ground for what they call negative partisanship.
Negative partisanship, what's that?
It's where people are more driven by hatred for the other side than they are by loyalty to their own.
So it's not even about what you believe in anymore, it's just about hating the other guys.
Pretty much, yeah. It's this us versus them mentality, and it's really tearing us apart.
Yeah, and it feels like the algorithms are making it worse, They just keep feeding us content that confirms our own biases.
Oh, absolutely.
Makes us even more distrustful of anyone who thinks differently.
It's like we're all living in these separate echo chambers, just shouting at each other across the digital divide.
Right.
We're constantly bombarded with outrage and negativity.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much harder to find any kind of common ground to engage in meaningful dialogue.
So how do we break out of these echo chambers? The book, it has to offer some suggestions for how we can start to bridge this divide, to create a more, cohesive society.
They do, yeah. And it starts with being more mindful of the language we use.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember that concept creep we talked about?
Yeah, right.
Where words are expanding their meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the authors, they argue that the way we use language, it can actually shape our perceptions and ultimately our actions.
So, if we're constantly using really inflammatory language, it's just going to make it harder to have a rational conversation.
Exactly. They encourage us to be more precise with our words. Avoid that emotionally charged rhetoric that can just shut down the conversation.
Right.
Instead of actually fostering dialogue. Think about it, you, the listener. When someone's using really extreme language, does it make you more or less likely to listen to their point of view?
I know for me, I tend to tune out when someone's just yelling at me, I'm much more likely to listen if they're speaking calmly and respectfully, even if I don't agree with everything they're saying.
That's a great point. It's about being willing to listen to others, to try to understand their perspectives, even when Or maybe especially when we disagree with them.
Right, and that's where empathy comes in, right? Being able to step outside of our own experiences
Yeah,
and see the world through someone else's eyes.
exactly.
But, that can be so hard, especially when we feel like our values are being attacked.
It's definitely a challenge, especially in this polarized climate we're living in. But the book really emphasizes that cultivating empathy, it's essential
Mm.
if we want to bridge this divide, create a more just and compassionate society.
Right. It's about remembering that we're all part of the same human family, facing the same challenges, sharing the same planet.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
It reminds us that we need to find ways to work together,
Mm-hmm.
even when we disagree.
So what does all this mean for our listeners? Like, what are some key takeaways they can, apply to their own lives?
Well, I think the book encourages us to be more mindful, more aware of how we're engaging with the world,
Okay.
both online and offline.
Mm-hmm.
Are we contributing to the polarization, the outrage,
Yeah.
or are we looking for understanding, looking for common ground?
Are we buying into those great untruths?
Yeah.
Or are we actually trying to cultivate wisdom?
Are we overprotecting our children, shielding them from challenges that could actually help them grow?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we giving them the freedom to explore, to experiment, to develop that resilience?
Are we just letting ourselves be swept away by all this outrage, all this
Mhm.
division? Or are we actively seeking out diverse perspectives, engaging in those difficult conversations that can lead to greater understanding?
Those are some big questions.
They are. They are big
And
questions.
they're important ones.
They are.
They're worth asking ourselves as we try to navigate this increasingly complex and challenging world.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
This deep dive, it's just scratched the surface of the coddling of the American mind. It's a really thought-provoking book.
It is.
And whether you agree with all of its conclusions or not, it's sure to get you thinking, get you talking.
Absolutely.
So hopefully this deep dive has helped you understand some of the core ideas,
Mhm.
without having to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
But if you are curious to learn more, we definitely encourage you to check out the book itself.
Yeah, for sure. And remember, this journey toward wisdom, it's
Mm.
ongoing.
Mm.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking out those diverse perspectives that can challenge your assumptions and broaden your understanding of the world.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those minds open.